Oh, you can hear me, but you can't see me. But I can see Kosh, and I can see Ben Herskowitz and the ever-present Mike Monaco.
Hello, everybody.
I'm off on assignment. I'm in Indiana, currently taking Tim Ferretti's most amazing compressed and alternate fuel. It's not just compressed natural gas. It's all types of shenanigans: hydrogen, LNG, CNG, propane, the propan, the propene, the propine.
And how's it going out there? I mean, I know you said that I tried to call you earlier today, and you were like, "Leave me alone. I'm busy. I'm like fascinated by this class."
It's actually a really good class.
Yeah, for you to be like, no. Like, I'm a student in this class. Leave me alone. Like, it's got to be a good class.
I hate sitting in other people's classes because their teaching style offends me. But his teaching style is so dynamic that it's very intriguing to watch him work the room, because he's like awkward at the same time as like in your face. It's very weird. It's very weird, but I like it. I really dig it. So it's pretty good. I'm having a good time. But
he's a good dude and a smart dude for sure.
Yeah,
when it comes to all that shit.
Oh, we got another one.
Ooh,
there he is.
Jeff.
Coming in hot. I like it. Well,
there he is.
Hey,
materialized.
All right,
Greatest
now I don't
American
feel so
hero.
bad about my camera being so dark.
What's with the time change?
What?
Daylight savings time?
Daylight savings?
Right.
Oh, Arizona doesn't do daylight
Arizona
savings.
doesn't do that shit.
Oh.
You guys are so fucking weird.
Yeah.
Well, what we do is we have a blanket that's too short, so we cut 2 feet off of the bottom and then re-sew it to the top so it covers more.
Yeah, that's an old Indian phrase. Old
Yep.
white man says they can cut the bottom of a blanket off and sew it on the top, and they think it got a bigger blanket. But that's you guys.
Well, we are about to pull Cold Zone scholarship. They were nice enough to give us a scholarship. And drumroll, please, Bob. Who is the winner for Cold Zone?
Mr. Aaron Peterson from Minot. I hope I said that right. Fire Department. You, sir, are a lucky winner of Cold Zone Scholarship.
Well, we are going to email you with the specifics and send you some loot once you show us that you were there. And I will know that you're there because I'll be there. So make sure you avail yourself to me, and I will hand you some loot, courtesy of the sponsors, the fine sponsors that are showing up at the top corner of our show. Those people contributed money in and are helping send people to the community. So good stuff, and congratulations. Yeah, golf clap. Anything else before we get into the topic of the night?
I don't think so.
All right, then let's crack it. Somebody threw on the table tonight as where we threshold. I don't want to do it injustice. Zones and thresholds is what I took from it.
So what I basically said is work on a program called gerrymandering hazmat, and that is okay. And so hazmat is very different all over, and to channel a little bit of Bill Clinton, it really depends upon what your definition of is, right? So how you define what, and it's funny because one of the other pieces to it is like how you even define what is a hazmat incident. And then Bob posted that here's how many hazmat incidents and here's how many tech rescue incidents. And that also comes down to definitions, how you define what is a hazmat and what is not a hazmat, which is very different all over the country. Even within the same state, jurisdiction. When it comes to establishing the hot zone, there are a lot of different ways to do it. And so much like gerrymandering in terms of like a political subdivision, how you set your zones is very different. And I've heard some people say, well, I set it up this way. And I'm like, all right, I can follow that logic. And I've had other people say, well, I do it this way. And I have trouble reconciling that. And so I figure what better way to flesh this topic out than with a bunch of people I know will absolutely tear it apart, sink their teeth into it and shake it. And so I think that's some good thing, as well as folks obviously following along that can put in their comments. So some departments have Right, but you have fire departments, right, that go with the ERG, and it says 330 feet, so I know that's a rail car of chlorine, but 330 feet is what it initially says, so that's the hot zone, right? And I think we can all agree that's not good. And then we have other places that say, absolutely, we set the hot zone at this particular threshold limit value. And I don't think that's a great way to do it, but I want to kind of see what you guys think as to how do you establish and assign what is the hot zone, and then I'll kind of tinker some stuff in. Some I agree with, some I don't, just to kind of see what happens.
I'll save mine for the end.
I'll take the first stab. I think the hot zone is something that is wildly interpretable. All right. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, you can say, well, it's at 10% or 20% of the LEL, whatever it is. But let's say maybe the LEL is a bad radiation might be a better one, right? What if our background is double background? What if double background is 1 mile away from source? Like, how are you going to go on air and go a mile? Even if you had a gator or something, you're going to ride in a car or some stupid shit like that, right? How are you going to get there? So, like, I think the hot zone threshold have to be settable by the scenario. Like, you can have rigid things that are written down on paper, but at some point, somebody is going to have to say, no, that's dumb. For this scenario, it doesn't work. We have to move it to this. And there has to be a consensus to say, yeah, you know what? That's a valid argument, because it all comes down to the argument. That's my basis thing is, if you have a solid argument, then we can move the rules as long as the consensus of us agree on it. That's my 2 cents.
So
let me radiation. Good.
I'm sorry. Let me throw this in there. We're assuming that we know what it is, or we don't know what it is.
Let's go with we know what it is. And for now, since he teed off the ball, let's just stick with radiation. I was going to do that second, but he was ready to go with it first. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think even radiation shows that you can't do that, right? Because we always teach 2 millirems to 10 millirems for the hot zone line. That's assuming that you have a gamma source that is kind of contained in an area. But if you go up to like 1 millirem and you like swipe the ground for ground shine, and you find that it's particulates that are in the air, then I don't want that as like my hot zone line. Like, I want to be much, much further back, because I am contaminated in that I will be contaminated. If you switch over from rems to counts per minute, your counts per minute are more than likely going to go through the roof if you have contamination in the area. So, like Bob said, like this idea that it's one solid thing is it's kind of nonsensical, sort of,
right,
in a way,
Because what I find with a lot of different teams is you have the twice or 3 times background group, and we'll talk about that. We have the 2 MR per hour because that's some regulatory limit. And then if you look at the guidance for like dirty bombs, like they're like, hey, your hot zone, like if you want to be effective at all, you're looking at like R per hour and just accepting certain things, because you can't physically control it. Like you look at, the videos are all centered in your former employer's town, right? New York City. Like, how much real estate can you are you capable of even managing? And that's certainly a part of it. And then when we get into like the twice background, I think double background was great advice when we were using the old civil defense meters, because they weren't very sensitive. But now think about how sensitive that is. You could double background walking into a courthouse because of all the granite.
I was just gonna say, how do you know what double background is?
Well, you take the background and double it. It's like a multiplication.
L'chaim. Yeah, no.
So, or you could just add the number twice. It works both ways.
So and that's why I love him so much. But no, seriously, because Ben mentioned the granite, and we have a lot of that kind of stuff with some of the buildings, the older buildings in downtown Orlando. So what we ended up doing was mapping out the area of that downtown area to write down what our background was for that specific geolocation, so that if we ever did have something in that area, we know our background, our twice our background should be this. And if we're above that, then yeah, we do have a spill. Well, now, not everybody can do that, obviously, but we did that.
Hold on. So I was always under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when we're talking about double background, we're talking about counts per minute. And we're talking about counts per minute for purposes of contamination and decontamination.
Mhm.
When we're surveying an area, we're not using counts per minute. We don't do double background because double background, I mean, the meter swings double background just sitting there if you're looking at microrems per hour, right? And so we in general hit that 2 millirem to 10 millirem mark to 10 microrem mark as the line for surveying, and contamination becomes twice background, which we always have to do in the moment because those counts per minute can change by cosmic rays. They could change by, somebody ate a highly radioactive banana that day, and that becomes, kind of like your background. So I don't necessarily know if the twice background for contamination is where we want to start. I don't know if we want to use counts per minute to start drawing lines, other than making sure that we are not setting up in an area with ground shine.
Right. And I apologize because I misspoke. I didn't mean twice background. I meant a baseline for our radiation in the area. I misspoke. I apologize.
So the way I refer to it, and so again, definitions, right? You get to make up your own words. So like I view the twice background crowd, or if it's a cause for pause, right? I'm looking at my meter, I see something, I just need to pause and figure out why, right? Like just stop, take a moment, stop, think, act, review, right? And then you get into
for radiation.
Right. So like if you're
all right, I'm sorry,
yeah,
I don't mean
no,
to be
okay.
a douche.
No.
Right?
No.
So you're walking into a scene with, say, like a pancake probe versus your gamma scintillator probe.
So now I have
GM2,
it's not my personal opinions. When you look at some of the guidance that has existed, and so the problem is, right, if it existed 20 years ago, there are teams that still use it. They're talking MR per hour, not counts per minute, right? Okay. If that's your thing, and I'm not saying I 100% agree, but if I'm walking into somewhere with a detector, gamma, or a pancake, or like, because again, you got to consider all the different types of radiation, which could take us down quite the rabbit hole. But if I'm operating a scintillator, let's say, and all of a sudden I double background, there's no problem with stopping and saying why, right? That's there. You sometimes you get a reading and you're like, maybe I should stop and evaluate why this is. It'd be like walking into a reported carbon monoxide alarm. You're like 10, not 35, but like I should stop for a second, be like, this is still something, and I should take a moment to think about it. Versus the 2 MR per hour line, I call it the POP. That's the point of paperwork. There's some regulation out there that now that I've hit that point, there might be additional things I need to do from a regulatory standpoint. And so right. But neither of those, I think, are necessarily the greatest way to establish a hot zone, but you find two camps. Like, well, this is weird, so I should stop here and evaluate it. And some people set their hot zone there. Not saying I agree with that. And there's some people who are like, it only matters when I have to do paperwork. And that's not necessarily great either, because most of the threshold limit values were designed for workers, not for the public.
I want to throw this out there because I think it's good. I'm going to throw it to Jeff. Is that Adam McFadden throws something in there, and I'm throwing this. I'm speaking this because the Facebook people don't see all the group, but this is the more I read it, the better it gets. The amount of time I've seen a company officer evacuate an entire high-rise or commercial building during a hazmat event, when all they had to do was close some doors to create a hot zone, right? So let's say you have a chemical release, and that chemical is lightly covering the entire building, and we're evacuating the entire building versus closing it, concentrating it, and having the rest of the building unaffected. What are your thoughts about that? Let's say you're the first IC on there. Is that a technique? I don't think that's typical, but I actually like it.
Well, let's take it, because again, we've said it before about like how smoke, all the toxic chemicals in smoke. I do a lot of work for like extended care facilities or skilled nursing facilities or hospitals. They're not evacuating quickly. So how are they, during a fire alarm, how are they isolating things to kind of protect in place? Well, they're using smoke doors and fire doors. Like that's an everyday occurrence. The fire alarm goes off in a hospital. There are doors that will automatically close to begin to isolate, and in some cases control HVAC. That's more common than you think. And that's ideal H, right? We're worried about smoke and heat and fire. And so that's, again, is that a hazmat incident? Right. That gets back to the original, like, define it. But we do that on a regular basis. We're closing doors is totally acceptable. Fire rated doors and smoke rated curtains and doors are totally acceptable all day, every day. Building inspectors for cities across the country go out and inspect that stuff and say, if this happens, if you're behind this door, that's acceptable. So I'd say it's an acceptable practice.
Yeah.
JC, do you think it's if I was on a hazmat scene, I don't know if that would be my first move, but the more I digest that, the concentration of a hot zone intentionally is a plus. I never really thought about it in that angle.
We discussed that too. Like we have a Vegas style high-rise casino out here, and we talk about, because we get a lot of gas leaks like everybody else does, and what if you get a gas leak in the kitchen, and even if you're getting 1 or 2% LEL or 3% LEL or whatever, it's like, you're still far away, but there's no way you're going to evacuate the entire structure. It's just not going to happen. Maybe some people are too young to remember the MGM Grand when that thing burned. The people died sitting at the slot machines, So to get people to go out is not probably feasible, but to isolate it, however you can do that, is probably a better tactic. I totally agree with that. And it's obviously it's chemical dependent, and it's kind of the situational dependent, but I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. That's when you start to just go, okay, we have it. Where's it at? How do we mitigate it?
How do you look when looking at that from an incident commander's point of view, right? So some of the finer nuances of evacuation versus shelter in place are concentration, right? Like your acute exposure guidelines. And when you think about what we can actually pick up with our meters versus the chemicals that are out there, how do you make that call when in reality, we have more than likely no way of knowing what the concentration is of that chemical throughout the building?
Well, I think one of the problems with it is that in order to, like, if we were taking one of the buildings, the building I'm talking about, or one of your buildings in New York City, what would it take to really to dump that building? I mean, what resources would it take? Probably beyond what a lot of fire departments have. Probably wouldn't be beyond our capabilities. I mean, we have 20 or we have 30 cities that work together. We've got, I don't know, 500 engines or whatever, that we got the personnel, but then again, you're leaving the whole rest of the city uncovered. So I think what it is that the IC, they don't like to make that decision, but it's kind of like a decision you have to make. And then at that point, it's like, okay, we got to work. We got to figure out what the fuck is going on. And that's all there is to it. And I it's kind of like what Ben said there with the ERG, they give those evacuation distances, and it's like, come on, a mile, really? I mean, so, let's put on our common sense hat and let's do this. But if we do have something, I want my guys to work. I want them to work, and I want them to figure out what's going on so we can get this thing taken care of.
Go ahead. I think the first thing too is it comes into a rapid recon, right? Like, you don't know what you're dealing with, and I hate the term unknown, because typically we know something. We know it's a solid, liquid, or gas. And if we want to play the ERG game, we know initial isolation, 75 feet for solid, 150 for liquid, and 330 for a gas. So knowing those basic little things, and then using our instrumentation and our papers to do a rapid recon to see what it is we're even dealing with as far as corrosive, radiation, whatever. From that point, then we can deal with the evacuation. In 01, we were running 30, 40 powder calls a day. It was stupid with all the anthrax powder shit we were running. and they dumped the tallest building we got at the time was 30 stories in the courthouse and in the mailroom because some little white powder. And the chief judge dumped the whole building, so 3,000 people came pouring down the stairwells all of a sudden.
Which isn't always the best thing. So one of my arguments is this is where, I mean, tying back to some of Mike's topics is like, how long does a hazmat tech class have to be? Like, if you're making that decision, there's a lot more into it than just the threshold limit value time weighted average. There's the physical and chemical property. So let's take a high rise. What's typically, at least in our area, we have these, what's typically in a hotel, what's on the first floor because it'd be too heavy to put on the roof in most cases? The pool, right? So Dilbert and his buddy Dilbert go in and mix some chemicals and it's chlorine, right? So that's the first floor. Like, is it practical to bring everybody down through, not that it's gaseous chlorine, but like you get the general gist. Like, is it practical to bring everybody down through that? Like, does that have to weigh into it?
Well, yeah. And I think if we're specifically talking about like an isolation of the building, I think one of the more important things is going to be where and how the HVAC is applied.
Yeah.
Because if you've got an HVAC on the first floor and it is going to rotate air or circulate air through the first 3 layers of the building, then I think you've got justification for emptying that if you can't shut off the HVAC. The heavier than air, the lighter than air, those all kind of come into play. Statistically speaking, it's going to be heavier than air. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into like the how and the why. But specifically using your meters, I think that's a kind of a rough gamble because we can only pick up 4 things.
Right, especially on the fire department side. So if I could switch it up here, we'll go over directly to fire department because I have it kind of keyed up in my brain here. Is how we, for example, not that it's a traditional hazmat incident, although I believe NFIRS, or what I can't think what the new one is right now off the top of my head. Someone will put it in the chat for sure. But like a CO leak, when they run the statistics, at least in Pennsylvania, I believe gas leaks and CO alarms register on the hazardous condition, and in some cases get lumped in with hazmat calls. So what is the hot zone at a CO leak? I can tell you what most people do, and then I'm going to offer some banter as to, I think it's the right call, but I'll offer some banter as to why maybe it's not.
I'm going to say the physical outside of the building.
Right. But in a bigger building, right, most places I see, it's when the alarm goes off at 35 parts per million.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I ask, why is that? Is it because it becomes unsafe at 35 parts per million?
No, it's because that's what alarms for the residents living in a 24-hour environment.
So, I mean, my thought is like it's set up as the time weighted average for 8 hours. So as a firefighter, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't wear an air pack, but like, could I say, you know what, this is the only CO call I'm going to run today. I'm going to wait until 70 because as long as I'm not more than 4 hours at 70, my average is less than 35. Is that acceptable?
No, because you can't predict the future.
Right.
You can't say that's my only CO call because you could have that CO call be in there for 2 hours. Your CO goes through the roof internally, and then you're off to a job. I know we all wear our masks the moment we get off the rig, right? So,
Right.
Then you're getting your another dose of CO with your hydrogen cyanide, with all the crap that's in the smoke to begin with. And I think for us, the general idea of hazmat is we do this enough. We don't want to have those chronic exposures. So, and one of the things I was going to say to all this is who gives a shit? Because I don't think I've ever actually set up a hot zone. I don't think I've ever actually set up a warm, I don't think I've ever set up a zone. I think we put our mask on before we get in the area. We decon in an area where there's absolutely nothing. And the space in between, we kind of call the hot warm zone. But when has anybody ever actually set up hard lines in which they say, at this point, we're crossing into the hot zone?
For evaluated exercises only.
Yeah,
right.
Classroom.
It's not like one step forward, you're in. Well, it's not like, okay, I can go up to this step, the 59th step, but if I go to the 60th step, now I need an SCBA. It's like you put it on at 50, and you're going to walk through that line. It's a
Right.
blurry line, I would say.
I agree. I've had people tell me
like stop signs. They're suggestions.
I have a bunch of people that have told me that IDLH is where they set their hot zone, like very firmly. Like they believe it. They
I don't disagree with that.
So what is that? But what does that mean? Like, what does it mean in practice? Like, we talk about that. I hate this in the classroom too, because we teach and talk classroom talk, but then we never actually make it applicable to the real world, right? Like, so what does it actually look like in the real world? Are you really going to wait for the IDLH to put your stuff on? Like, what would be the purpose of exposing yourself to that? Like, the air you're breathing is free, right? And from somebody who's a non-intervention specialist, like, I get not wanting to do anything, but really, like, you're going to wait for IDLH to put on your, and then what does that even look like? What kind of idiot realizes that they're at the IDLH when they can only measure with their meters a few chemicals? Unless you're talking about chlorine, ammonia, and sulfur dioxide, which in general, or CO2, which is limited, is in general the extra spare single gas meters that people tend to carry. Beyond those, where is the argument for IDLH? Because you can't even measure for the IDLH.
So that's my first point. But my other thing is, so like, as you apply, and this is you're going to be easily pick some of this stuff apart. But like, okay, so my question is, all right, so let's say chlorine, because we have a single gas meter, we can find 10 parts per million chlorine. Okay, so I find 10 parts per million chlorine. I put my flag in the ground. This is the edge of the hot zone. I'll use the word definition loosely. What is the warm zone? Right, it's decon. It touches both zones. Mm-hmm. So how big is your decon? What, 20 feet, 30 feet?
I didn't realize we were comparing decon sizes.
Yeah, well, listen, it's all in how, it's the motion of the ocean, right?
Right.
But my point is, like, the hazmat doesn't know it's not allowed to cross that line. And furthermore, if I'm at 10, what's the likelihood that 20 feet away, I'm not over the time weighted average? Right now we're back to the same discussion with CO. Like, we put it on, like, if for no other reason than it's less paperwork, and I can't predict the future, and so I just put it on for either of those reasons. I would say either is acceptable. So for people that say it's always IDLH, my argument is, like, that's too close. Well, because the hazmat doesn't know that it can't cross that line, and so if it's 5 feet away from that spot, like, you're going to set decon there, like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I look at it differently. So the warm zone starts when you're at the PEL, and the hot zone starts at the IDLH, because those are the actual triggers where you're going to put on your SCBA versus you're going to put on your PPE, right? And so we say this consistently as instructors, is that there's a hot, a warm, and a cold. But if we don't ever hit the IDLH, then there is no hot zone. We have a warm zone and a cold zone. Are there hazmat incidents that have only cold zones? Yeah, I'm sure there is. Or at least if you approach it right, maybe if the wind is shifting or something like that, and the wind is blowing the PEL away from you, then you could theoretically walk up in shorts and flip-flops straight to the valve and shut it off without ever needing anything other than nothing. It's possible.
I don't disagree.
Assuming the hazard is a vapor inhalation hazard.
Right. But we always come up with this whole concentric circle thing and I get plume modeling and all that stuff. I get that. But at the same time, we program people to look at bullseyes, and that's not true.
It's not practical. And it's not all encompassing of the threats. So I was just looking at the time here, and we could talk more on all of these things. Let's talk like flammables, right? So the example that I always give is, propane or ammonia, right? We have a 1 gallon container of propane. And again, we're not talking like specific, there's just generalities, right? So how big is a 1 gallon container of propane? You're like, well, let's say a milk jug. All right. So is that how big the hazard is? And they're like, well, no. Well, you got to, like, put that out. How big, if you mix that with air, how big of an area, if that's being released with the expansion ratios, how big of an area is 100%. Like it goes from the liquid to the gas. So it's what, 250-ish, 270, right? Okay, so now it's 270 milk jugs. So is that the size of the zone? Well, I would argue it's not, because you got to distill that out till it's at, the lower explosive limit.
The hot zone is larger than a Brooklyn backyard.
Yeah.
And if you know the inside to that, then you know.
I don't, but I'll take your word for it. But when you so you let that expand out. All right, well, now I need to let that expand out until it's at the lower explosive limit, right? Until it's able to actually be a problem. All right, well, is it that, or is it 10%, right? Some people say, well, we should be looking at 10% because that's IDLH. Well, that's a much bigger space. And then the follow-on question is, well, now we're looking at just from the physical chemical property hazard. How about when that does finally blow up? Because we've had a few in our area where like they go for a gas leak and somebody's walking along and hits their helmet into the exposed light bulb in the basement, right? And it's not just the people inside that have problems. You got all the people that get showered with glass as everything blew out. Well, arguably that should that have been included in the hot zone? And that's where we get really into this, like teaching people to assess risk as opposed to assigning arbitrary numbers. And I agree with Bob 100%. We teach, and I think, and I'd have to look it up, so don't quote me on it, and I'm sure someone will correct me, but like there are books out there and some standards that go and define the zones, and the way that some people interpret that leads people to one conclusion or another, as opposed to really assessing the risk as a whole and all of the different risks.
I don't think in any way, shape, or form the ERG belongs in the technician realm at all, right? So like, if that's the book that you're referring to, I think it's great for an operations guy. You come up on scene, you set those establishments, but then you rely on the technician to come in and do the evaluation and reset, all of those zones. And that can only be done, like everything else in this stupid freaking business, through chemical physical properties, behavioral modeling, prediction.
I would agree. I think there are a few technician level books. I mean, first off, I refer to the ERG as the Fisher Price My First Hazmat book, and you're welcome to use that. I really feel that way. And it's almost the right color, truth be told. And I think the problem is, though, that's not the only book that defines it. And I'm not going to mention names, I don't want to get any legal trouble, but there are books that literally say the warm zone, or the hot zone is the exclusion zone, only technicians are there. Right. And then they define that, and then they go, and the only thing that happens in the warm zone is decontamination and staging for decontamination. And then they go on to say, well, the cold zone is everything else. And then there's some books that say the cold zone is the area that is not in the hot or warm zone, but that you control. And that in theory, like the public shouldn't even be in the cold zone, right? The public is outside the outer perimeter.
Right. They're in the isolation zone.
Right. And so that's the dilemma, is so when you look at these things and you go and you teach different people, they have whatever they latched onto based on training. And we have, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people are very, IDLH is the hot zone. Time weighted average is the hot zone. It's this many feet because the book says so. And when we work our way in, and there's not some of the training has not caught up to the fact that these zones like are capricious and arbitrary, much like, we're going back to the beginning with gerrymandering, much like we're like, I want to get a specific thing. You have the crowd that's like, I want this to be the smallest it can be. And so I'm going to gerrymander the numbers or whatever so that I can have the smallest possible footprint. And there's cases to be made for that. I've been on calls where I made the case for that. Like in fact, the first time I realized this was a number of years ago at a radiation event on the Turnpike. And we're like, if I were to use one of these, I'd be closing down. So like the Turnpike would be closed. Think of all the damage, and this really isn't that big a deal. And so we chose a different standard to be able to reduce that, to say we can leave these lanes open so people can just fly by. We're just not letting people stop.
So use that common sense standard.
Right. Well, like tough, I know. But then we started thinking about that. Well, how's that apply to, again, like there's, fire guys that are like, going for high score for LEL. And it's like, well, I don't need you to do that for me. And so as I start talking to people, there's like a lot of different, and then you have the people that like are worry wimps, and it has to be the biggest possible hot zone. If it says 6.5 miles downwind, God damn it, we're gonna call every off-duty, in-duty state trooper, helicopter, whatever, and we're going to try and evacuate all this. And we're like, well, it doesn't say evacuate, it says protect. We're like, well, right, but I'm going to protect them by evacuating them. It's like, well, that doesn't work. Just like in the hospital, like you have fire in the laundry room, people on the 8th floor, you're not snapping your fingers and getting those people off the 8th floor. You're going to have a better plan. And so some of the training at the ops level, the people that we have teaching, don't understand that, because not all of the people who teach operations are technicians. And even then, as you guys sure know, not every technician is a practicing technician. They're not. You've taken a 32-hour hazmat class, and now you're the instructor teaching another 32-hour hazmat class. You're missing a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's a really good argument to bitch slap the IDLH guys. And the problem with it for me is that they're thinking about it from a point linear point of view instead of a diminishing returns point of view. Meaning like, oh, okay, the IDLH, let's go with chlorine, because I just brought this up, and I'm telling you right now, I just put this in my thought into ChatGPT, so I'm gonna, and it gave the perfect example, right? So okay, 10 is the hot zone. Well, what do we do with the hot zone? We put on our PPE, we put on our SCBA, the whole 9 yards. Well, what if we're standing at 5 parts per million, right? And so you turn around, and you're like, okay, I'm at 5 parts per million. What kind of damage is being done? Because IDLH is so that you could survive for 30 minutes. But how long could you survive at 9 parts per million? How long can you survive at 8 parts per million? It doesn't mean the world is safe at that point.
It used to be, and again, I don't remember, because when I did some research today, just to make sure that I was on par, that like 2.5 was the short-term exposure limit. And I don't think that's still current. I think that's old.
Right.
But
like 1 to 3 parts per million may be tolerable for about an hour with mild nose irritation. So like it may not, like IDLH means it's going to kill you in half an hour. Like, why would you put that line at it's going to kill me in a half an hour?
I wouldn't. But but again, there are people that are like, that's where it is. It's like, that's not practical. Right. But and worse, in some places, that's what's written down, which means when it goes sideways and you unfortunately have the repercussions that go with a whoops, when people are going to read that, like, that's the dilemma. And so on a different rad side, we're talking about like the exercises for nuclear power plants, the REP program. Like, when you're doing one of those exercises, if you find a problem in the plan, they tell people you're better off following the plan wrong than you are going against the plan. And that's, I think, ridiculous, because if I found a problem, why wouldn't I want to address it? And they're doing it because if they, in their mind, it's a planning issue, which is a lower level infraction than not following the plan, which is, again, I think a terrible precedent to set, but that's what we're training people to do. And I think there's also that level of realism.
Sounds like every religious textbook ever written.
For sure. But for example, like what I found was like you show as a time weighted average for chlorine is 0.5.
I looked up the IDLH. I don't know what the time weight is.
I have it as 0.5. And so like if we apply the same standard we talked about with CO, like I shouldn't be at 0.5 unless, I mean, hopefully you're only responding to 1 chlorine call a day. If you're not, I think you have a different problem in your town. But the same rules, in my opinion, same rules should apply. Like, do I really need to be exposing my people to something that requires math, which then means that there's the potential for harm? Or do I have to put that against I have to set it up here because it's close enough for my people to take action to protect large populations, which comes back to like all of the different risks. So in my opinion, the hot zone is this matrix of threat, harm, and regulation that you kind of, I don't want to say it's a sliding scale, but you have to be looking at all of those factors, because there are times where you need it to be tight and concise. In fact, somebody mentioned a Vegas style casino. My understanding from talking with some guys from Vegas, like it's like the special ops super secret squirrel. Like their gear is stored in luggage. They go up to the floor, set up across the room so that nobody knows, because tourism is such a big deal. And
I know a theme park like that.
Yeah, I imagine it's like that at a theme park. And then you have places where it's just like, somebody smelled a fart 6 blocks away and we're going to evacuate we're going to evacuate 6 nursing homes. And that's not practical, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of my point or thoughts is like, how do you, as you're teaching people, that's a tough skill to teach because common sense isn't so common. And there's a million different ways to die in the West.
I think this is a topic for everybody that's watching or listening or will watch and listen to bring back and have that open conversation at your place of work. I don't know. And have the conversation.
Or worship in some cases.
Or worship. I don't know. And so I'd like to wrap up this month's Hazmat Roundtable. Thank you to Jeff and Mike and Ben and Bob and me and the winner of the Cold Zone 2026 conference. Thank you to Chuck and Mike for making sure that we can put one out there. It's good stuff. Help the community. And with that being said, I think we'll wrap it up. And yeah.
Thanks.
And
thanks for letting me ask these questions and banter this back and forth and kind of see some different views.
Well, don't thank me. I was against it, but Bob said it was
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Not really.